Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Up with Steph. Today, I'm going back to what I used to do all the time, which was solo episodes. That's how I started this podcast. I did a whole bunch of those. I got kind of burnt out, and then I started interviewing guests, which has been really fun. But I also want to do some solo episodes now and then. So today, I wanted to do one because I know we're wrapping up the year, and a lot of times people want to start new habits in the new year or get better or whatever. So I wanted to put together an episode based off the most common mistakes that I see as far as when I'm doing assessments, things that I used to do wrong all the time, and things that you should really stop doing if you want to start feeling better. I guess a playlist of the most common mistakes that I see out there. And I want you to know I'm not here just preaching and telling you what to do because I've always been perfect. I have not. That's the whole reason I got into ergonomics is because I was struggling. I knew that I was doing stuff wrong in the operatory because I was in pain all the time. And I got to the point where I was like, I can't physically do this anymore. My low back was my problem. And I was like, am I going to start selling real estate? Am I going to become a rep? What am I going to do? And so many of us in dentistry, I think, find ourselves in that position, or we start getting scared, be like, oh my God, I feel like I've only got a few years left. I spent all of this money on school. What am I going to do? I don't want you to be in that boat. I actually found my way out of that boat with ergonomics. And there's all kinds of things that we do, right? When we start to get in pain, we go to the chiropractor, or we start doing PT, or we start doing different workouts, we get massages, and those things do help. But if we're just coming back to our operatory and doing the same old, and making all of those same mistakes again, we're not really doing anything. We're just kind of spinning our wheels. And then we go back to the chiropractor, feel good for a little bit, go back into the operatory and reach a million times or twist a million times or whatever we're doing. And then we're a mess again. So really, we need to just slow down and focus on what we're doing every day in the operatory, because injuries like carpal tunnel, rotator cuff, low back injury, like what I had, it's the accumulation of these really small movements and mistakes that we're doing every day in the operatory. So that's what we're focusing on today. Just like all of my other episodes, I do have this separated in chapters. So if you want to skip around and not listen to me talk the whole time, that's totally fine. Just skip to that topic that you want. But the topics today are stop not being in neutral posture, stop using the wrong clock position. Yes, there's right and wrong clock positions. Stop having your patient in the wrong spot. If you think about patient positioning, this is so important because wherever our patient is, that's going to dictate our position. And if we want to be in neutral posture, there's a certain spot that our patient needs to be in, which we'll cover today. Stop death gripping everything, whether it be your air water, your suction, your handpiece, your instruments, your mirror. We've got this habit of having this death grip. We're just holding on to things like our life depends on it. Don't do that, because that's one of the leading causes of injury, especially in the hands and wrists. Stop cutting off your circulation. Blood flow is so important. In fact, a lot of us are in pain because of lack of blood flow. So I'll give you some tips on that. And then towards the end, I'm going to talk about some non-operatory tips. I mean, yes, as far as ergonomics, everything we're doing in the op is really important, but there's a few lifestyle things like diet, sleep, exercise that I think are really important. So we'll touch on that towards the end. Hey, it's Steph, and welcome to the Straight Up With Steph podcast, where we have real discussions around health and life and just trying to be better at both. All right, mistake number one, not being in neutral posture. Let's just revisit what neutral posture is. We have a skeleton, right? Our bones are stacked on top of each other a certain way. And when our bones are in alignment and our skeleton is stacked the way it should be, we have a lot of stability and strength without a lot of muscle engagement. We want to use our bones. If you hear the term stack your bones, that's what this is referring to. Our bones are nice and thick and hard, and they don't fatigue like our soft tissue does. So if our bones are stacked, we can hold these positions for a long time without getting tired. When we start getting tired, or we start getting in pain, or have these trigger points or get sore, it's because we've broken neutral, and then our soft tissue is then trying to hold us up. A lot of times we're not walking around thinking about gravity because it's there all the time, but it is a force that's constantly pulling us down. And whether we know it or not, we're constantly fighting against that. That's why it's so important to use our skeleton, because if we use our bones, it can hold us up, resist gravity, no problem. When we break neutral, for example, if our head is out forward or our arm is out in chicken wing, if you're not watching this on YouTube, I'm just doing the chicken wing posture. I'm sure you know what I mean. That's when our soft tissue is then holding us up and resisting gravity. That's not what the soft tissue is meant for. Our soft tissue is meant to help us move around through space, right? Contract and relax muscles, move around, run, walk, get up, not hold us in these chicken wing postures or having our head stooped forward or our whole body like hunched over like a shrimp. Those are all examples of awkward postures, which is really hard on the musculoskeletal system. So, neutral posture. If you're looking at yourself or someone else from the side, there's some benchmarks that we should look at. And by the way, I do have a free posture mini course that I'll link down in the show notes that goes over how you can have neutral posture with your patients on your cell phone. Those things are killing us. Laptops, even when you're driving. The rules are all pretty much the same, but we always want to try to be in neutral posture. So from the side, the ear should be vertically stacked on top of the shoulder. A lot of us in dentistry have our ear in front of the shoulder because we're hunching over our patients, or happens with cell phones too. We need to move our head up and back to get the ear vertically stacked on top of the shoulder. Our head is really heavy. It's an average of like 10 to 13 pounds. And we want to use our skeleton to hold up our head. When our head is out forward, just think of you hunching over your cell phone or your laptop or your patient. The muscles in our back and our neck are straining to hold that heavy ass head up because our skeleton isn't doing its job. So move your head up and back to get the ear vertically stacked on top of the shoulder. Now, in dentistry, I know it's hard to do this all the time. I don't even do this all the time, but I would say I'm in neutral posture a good 90% of the time because I'm aware of posture. A lot of it's just body awareness, but then using really good loupes. I use the ergonomic deflection style loupes, which has been a game changer for me. But the more often you remind yourself, like head up and back to get the ear on top of the shoulder, that's going to become more your normal, which is what we want. We want that to be our normal. And then every now and then we might have to break neutral and hunch or lean or whatever. But we want that to be the exception to the rule. But a lot of times, us in dentistry, our default posture is this forward head position. And I'm not going to lie, that used to be my default posture. I feel like my body still wants to go there sometimes, especially when I'm working on my computer for a long time or editing videos on my cell phone. I can feel my head just starting to creep forward, and I have to fight against that. But a lot of us in dentistry are scared of getting the dental hunchback, right? That stooped over appearance that we see a lot in seasoned clinicians who have been working a long time. And I count myself as a seasoned clinician now. Does seasoned just mean old? I think so. But none of us want that. It's not a cute look, and it's really terrible for our posture. It affects our breathing. It even affects our GI. Like, it has so many effects, posture does. So long story short, keep your head up and back, and make sure you check out that free posture course that I have down in the show notes too. Another aspect of neutral posture is our arm position. So we want our arms close to our sides with the elbows bent at about 90 degrees. So our forearms are parallel to the floor. That's ideal. I mean, every now and then we're going to have to reach for stuff, or our arms are going to be out from our sides a little bit. But again, we want the arms close to our sides to be our default normal posture. And then every now and then, if we have to do something crazy for a few seconds, that's okay. All right. Mistake number 2 is stop using the wrong clock position. And I know clock positions, there's no like one position that you're going to use all the time. And honestly, it's good for us to move around a little bit and not be in the same spot every time. But there's one clock position or one spot that I really want you to try to avoid at all costs. And that's going to be if you're right-handed, the 7 o'clock, and lefty 5 o'clock position. This is I call it the side sitting position, where your legs are pointed up towards the head of the patient. You've got your like hip facing the patient, and then you're twisting to work on them. That's like all of the ergonomic no-nos in one. Also, I go over neutral posture, stool adjustments, clock position tutorials, how to use rear delivery units in my operator positioning course, which will also be linked down below. I've made that course available that you can get just on its own. Or if you join my monthly membership, which by the way, there's no commitment, you can cancel anytime, but that's a really inexpensive way to get access to all of my courses without paying that one time price. So just keep that in mind. Now, I just said avoid using this clock position at all costs, which is true, but I still find myself there sometimes. If I've got like a really deep pocket on the mesial facial of number 25 and I can only get it from 7 o'clock, then I'm going to do it. But that's every now and then. And again, that's the exception to the rule. We want the rule to be either working behind the patient in that 11 to 1 o'clock position, if you're a righty or a lefty. We want to prioritize working from behind the patient. There's been some studies that have been done that plug electrodes up to clinicians to measure their muscle activity in each different clock position. And those studies all said we have the least amount of muscle engagement when we're behind the patient. So that's what I recommend trying to do as much as you can from behind the patient. I would say my comfort zone is like 10 to 12. That's where I really try to prioritize. And you can't do everything from back there, but you can do a lot, probably more than you think. And then the second clock position you want to use is a 9 if you're a righty or a 3 if you're a lefty. But the thing is, when you're off to the side, you want to be squared up. Remember, I mentioned we want to avoid that twisting, that side sitting position, which forces us into a twist. When you're either at 9 or 3, you want to be squared up with everything pointed in one direction. So you're facing your patient. So is your head, shoulders, hips, legs, feet. Everything is pointed towards the patient. None of this legs pointing one direction and shoulders pointed another direction, which forces you into a twist. And again, I go over exactly how to get that in that operator positioning course. When I was in dental hygiene school, like for the anteriors, for example, I was taught to scale surfaces away from behind the patient and then surfaces toward, I would come over to 7 o'clock and then do surfaces toward. And I'm not sure if all schools are still teaching this. I still hear this a lot. So at least some of them are. But I actually do all of the surfaces of the anteriors now from behind the patient. I use an offset sickle like Montana Jack or Nevi has a nice offset sickle scaler too. But when you're using an offset sickle like that, you can get all of the surfaces both toward and away from behind the patient. And you're even able to get really good lateral pressure too. I actually have a video on that on my Instagram, like how I get all of the surfaces of the anteriors from behind the patient. And that video is also up in my monthly member vault for my premium membership. If it's not up yet, it will be soon, but it's in the queue. So we want to prioritize working from behind the patient in that like 11 to 1 o'clock position. Second one is either 9 or 3 if you're righty or lefty, but making sure that you're squared up. And we want last on our list to be that 7 or 5 o'clock side sitting position. I've had so many requests over the years for what clock position is better for which quad and what surfaces. And it took me a few years, but I finally got it. So that's in that operator positioning course too. Third thing you should stop doing is not properly positioning your patient. Wherever we put our patient, that is going to directly impact our posture. For example, if we have them positioned too high, which I see a lot, what happens? Our shoulders go up into our ears. We're out in chicken wing. Maybe we're doing this leaning thing. And then if they're too low, which I don't see that often, but I do see it sometimes, we're usually have our head down forward or we're hunching over trying to work on them. So they need to be in the perfect spot. And I know I used to work, I would recline my patient to whatever spot. I wouldn't really think about it that much and they wouldn't move. Like I wouldn't adjust the chair, I wouldn't adjust the headrest, I wouldn't ask them to move for me, which was great for them. But what did that mean for me? I was doing all these acrobatics trying to work on them, right? Which we don't want to do. And positioning is different whether you're working on the upper arch or the lower arch. And I see this a lot that the patient is just placed wherever and there's no adjustments depending on the upper or lower arch. But if we want to protect our bodies and feel better and have good posture, we really need to start being deliberate with that. So remember earlier when I was talking about neutral posture and I mentioned arm position, we want the arms close to the sides with the elbows bent at 90 degrees with our forearms parallel to the floor. If you get into that posture and you look down at your elbow, that's where you want the patient's mouth to be. You want the patient's mouth to be parallel with your elbow when you're in neutral posture. This means that your forearms will be parallel to the floor. And this is a really nice, comfortable position to be in, as long as you have good loupes and the working distance is adjusted correctly and you're on a good stool. But oftentimes I see the patient too high. So the mouth is above the elbow, and that's causing the clinician to, like I mentioned, be out in chicken wing. The shoulders are up in the ears, or they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So we need to get the patients low enough. What I like is my head to be up high, right? I don't want to be hunching down or flexing my neck forward. You want the head high and your patient low, which when we're talking about loupes, I know this isn't a podcast about loupes, but you want to make sure that your working distance is long enough to allow for that. I don't want to get up on my soapbox about working distance with loupes, but it's very important. And I have a video on that as well, as far as how to get measured for your working distance. If you want that, just email me or hit me up and I'll send it to you. Side note, real quick, some of you guys might know, but I recently got a turtle as a pet. His little area is in my office. He's in like a glass enclosure, and he always tells me when he wants to get out, and he wants to get out bad right now, but I'm recording. I can't. But he's literally like glaring at me. Okay, back to patient positioning. There's so much that goes into this, and it's almost impossible to describe this on a podcast. So, I do have a patient positioning course as well. You can get it either by itself or that's included in the membership that I mentioned. But I go over exactly how you position the patient's head for the upper and lower arch, how you adjust the headrest. I'm a big fan of using cushions for the patient. One, it helps the patient be comfortable, which is really important because an uncomfortable patient usually is a uncompliant patient. So if we can increase their comfort with just using a simple cushion, like that's killer. Plus, if you're positioning it in the right way for the upper and lower arch, it actually gets the head into the right position, which is so much easier for you. So I go over that as well. But basically, for the upper arch, we need the chin tipped up really high towards the ceiling because we need the maxillary occlusal plane in a certain spot for us to have easier access and visibility. And then for the lower arch, we need the chin tipped down towards the chest because, again, we need the mandibular arch in a completely different spot. So it is different, and it seems tedious at first when you first start learning this. You're just like, okay, like it's just a lot to think about. Just like anything else learning, it's kind of a pain in the ass, right? But then it becomes more natural and normal. And I promise you, if you start getting your patient in the right spot, you are going to feel the difference. And honestly, ergonomics, at least the way I teach it, it's all about prioritizing you and your health. And I don't want you to be tired or sore or develop an injury just because your patient isn't positioned right. Like it's not worth it. And I know sometimes we have difficult patients, right, that don't want to lean back or refuse to, or they're medically compromised or whatever. And I have tips on how to handle those situations in that course as well. All right. Fourth thing to stop doing is the death grip. Why is it that when we hold on to something, we are squeezing the hell out of it? We don't need to do that. So, first tip, when you're holding on to whatever it is, whether it's your air water or your handpiece or your scaler or your mirror, you want as light a grip as necessary without dropping it. So usually we can lighten up our grip just a little bit. So that's going to help. But this excessive grip force or pinch force when we're holding on to things is one of the leading reasons why we get injured. It could be injury in our wrist, like tendonitis or carpal tunnel, could be forearm issues, elbow issues. That even carries up into the neck and shoulder, all because of our grip. So you want to lighten that up, just something to focus on, just really light grip. And over the years doing assessments for hygienists, I have not seen once a hygienist use a skinny handled scaler. I don't even know if they make them anymore, which is great. We want, as far as ergonomic handles, we want the handle to be nice and fat, a wide handle with some texture on it, and for it to be balanced and hollow, with just a really nice, wide, fat, light handle. That's an ergonomic handle. So I've seen them using those for scalers, which is great. But what do I see so much still is the mirror. I'm seeing these skinny, heavy metal mirror handles. Why are we doing that? There's so many options out there for ergonomic mirrors. My favorite ones are Zerk. I love their handles. They've got different ergonomic handle options, and the mirror itself is super bright and clear. I just love it. But anyways, there's other ones out there too. You just want to make sure that you have a mirror that has a wide, fat handle. When we're holding on to something skinny, we use a lot more force than if we're holding on to something fat. Also, if we're holding on to something really heavy, which those metal, I mean, it's solid metal, the handle is, and so it's way heavier than a skinny or than a fat resin one. But if we're holding on to something skinny and heavy, we're using a lot of pinch force. And it's my opinion that our non dominant arm is even at more risk for getting injured than our dominant one. Because if you think about how we're using our mirror or our non dominant hand, we're holding on to a mirror. A lot of times it's with a skinny, heavy handle. Okay. So that's a lot of pinch force. We're retracting something, a really strong cheek or a strong tongue. And we've got our arm out in chicken wing. So that's like 3 or 4 no nos in one. And we're not moving our arm. At least with our working arm, we're moving it, right? We're switching instruments, we're grabbing things. Our non dominant one is just kind of like hanging out here in space and it's not getting the circulation that it needs. So we need to take care of our non dominant arm. In my patient positioning course, I actually teach a technique for holding onto the mirror because a lot of times we're out in chicken wing because we're actually just holding the mirror in the wrong spot. So I teach a technique that changes where you're holding onto the mirror. You actually want to hold it down towards the mirror head, which brings in your chicken wing and it gives you an opportunity to rest your non dominant hand on the patient somewhere, on their teeth or on the side of their face or wherever. It's a lot easier to see that in video, so you can check that out in that course. But I'm curious, the next time you're in the operatory, see what your non dominant arm is doing. Is it out in chicken wing? If it's not, great. But a lot of times people don't realize how long their non dominant arm is out in chicken wing. And it's like, no wonder we start to get like pain and fatigue and injury on that side. Some other things to reduce pinch force is going cordless when you can. I swear I'm going to get buried with my cordless polisher. I love it. You don't realize how hard that cord is pulling against you until it's not there anymore. Like I had no idea how heavy that cord was until it just wasn't there. There's a lot of cordless polishers on the market. A lot of them take any profi angle, which is kind of nice. I've got my favorites. I really like those profi angles that have like the splatter guard that cut off all the splatter so, stuff isn't flying everywhere. There's another one too. It's called the Pro Flare that actually the cup on it is articulating. So it kind of hugs the curves of the teeth. So you're not actually having to like do as much of the wrapping motion, which is flexing your wrist. So there are actually ergonomic profi angles out there too, but cordless polishers, 100%. If you can do it, I highly recommend it. I promise you, you will not go back. And then using some kind of suction device. When I was in school, I was taught on an ultrasonic, well, and a piezo actually, but I was taught to hold my power scaler in one hand and then hold my saliva ejector in the other. So I was trying to retract and provide suction with my saliva ejector while I was scaling the teeth. This is maybe fine for a couple areas of the mouth where we can use direct vision, but what about all of those other areas where we need to use our mirror? We can't because we're holding on to the suction. Using our mirror is so important for good posture and ergonomics. I can't even tell you. I actually have a YouTube tutorial on learning indirect vision if you haven't mastered it yet, but that's something to really focus on if you want to get better with your posture and ergonomics. But there's so many devices out there now that will provide hands-free suction for you. It's just plug and play. You either put it onto your saliva ejector or put it onto your HVE, plug it into the patient's mouth. They're comfortable and dry. You can use your mirror and use your power scaler and have a lot better ergonomics. Another issue with holding onto the suction is usually we've got the death grip on it because we're retracting something. We're out in chicken wing and we're not giving our arm a break. So that's another thing that if you're doing that, highly recommend you stop doing that. Fifth thing to stop doing is stop cutting off your circulation. If you think of how we develop pain and why we get injured, it all starts with lack of blood flow. Blood isn't able to flow into certain areas when we're working. And we all know that blood is what heals the body, right? So if I'm out here in chicken wing, for example, and I've got my shoulder muscles and my neck muscles working overtime trying to hold this arm up, it's not getting the circulation it needs to heal that damage that I'm causing by being out here in chicken wing. So we need to get some blood flowing into the muscles. That's what happens when we're stuck in these awkward static postures for like minutes or hours a day. Or think of like an endodontist who's doing a really long root canal that's just stuck in that one position, seated for however long. There's certain parts of their body that is not getting blood flow. because they're seated for a long time, or maybe they're in a really awkward, tense position for a long time and it's cutting off blood flow. So, here's some tips for you. Do your micro breaks. If you follow me on social media, I talk about these a lot. These are strategic little stretch breaks that you take throughout your day. A lot of times I do see people stretching when I'm doing assessments, which is great, but it's like a second here, a second there, and then they get back to work. With micro breaks, you really want to stop and be intentional with it and hold the stretch for at least 20 seconds. And bonus points if you take some deep breaths, because that's just going to oxygenate those muscles. But we need those 20 seconds for the blood to actually be able to get into that soft tissue and start healing some of that damage. So a second here, a second there isn't really going to cut it. I actually have a free download that I'll link down in the show notes that you can print out, and it's a chairside stretch guide. And this isn't just random stretches. It's based on the muscles that we overuse most in dentistry. So you can just pick the ones that you want to do, but make sure that you're doing them throughout your day. Ideally, you're going to do one every 20 minutes for about 20 seconds. My top ones are the upper traps, because we all get tight here. And then the forearm muscles, usually because we've got that death grip. But there's some other great ones on that sheet as well. Another option is standing, trying to alternate sitting and standing. Just the act of getting up off of your stool and standing up promotes blood flow. So if you're trying to alternate sitting and standing, that's going to promote blood flow. You're also using different muscles. So you're not just always using the muscles used for sitting all day. You're kind of spreading out the load a little bit. And then another benefit of standing is your legs aren't in the way. So you can get nice and close to your patient. That's great for patients that can't lean back in the chair, maybe pregnant patients or more full-bodied patients where access is an issue. Standing is always a great option. I don't know if you're anything like me, but I am clumsy. And if I try to stand and operate the rheostat, it's not pretty, or I just overcompensate and it's not really helping. So what I do is I'll sit for things that I need the rheostat for, like using my power scaler or the laser, but then I'll stand for things that I don't need the foot pedal for. Giving injections, I will never sit and give an injection again if I can help it. It just helps so much with posture and visibility too. Flossing, docs can fill teeth when they're standing or do extractions. We can scan standing. That's another thing that I'll never sit for, is do an iTero scan when I'm sitting. So much better standing. But just try to alternate sitting and standing. Also, a note to dentists: when you're doing your hygiene checks, I would recommend standing. It's going to increase blood flow for you. It's going to feel a lot better. It's going to give your body a bit of a break. You're not going to be messing with the hygienist stool, which sometimes they don't like that. It's just a really good habit to get into. It's a good little break for your body. So try to stand more. Another thing is walking, trying to get your steps in. That's one thing I love about taking x-rays, is because I'm out of my chair, I'm moving around. It feels a lot better. But even outside of work, maybe at lunch, what are you doing on your lunch break? Are you sitting scrolling on your phone? Are you reading a magazine? Are you sitting chatting with people? Maybe get up and walk. Grab your work bestie, go on a 10 to 20-minute walk, get some more steps in over lunch. Try to get some steps in before work if you can, after work. All of this is going to promote blood flow. I've gotten into the habit too. When I go to the store, I park really far away from the store just to get more steps in. I'm one of those people. I'm such a dork, you guys. I have it with me right now. My pedometer. I'm showing it on the screen right now if you're just listening. I have this with me all the time. It just keeps me accountable. And if I look that I haven't hit my goal is always 10,000 steps a day, if not more. But if I look down, it's like my little accountability buddy. And I'm like, well, I guess I need to walk more. And there's always like little things that we can do to increase our steps. We get a lot of steps in the office, by the way, especially if you're like running around looking for an assistant or looking for the doc. We rack up a lot of steps that way. But maybe just get a cheap pedometer. I got one off of Amazon, and it's really increased the amount of walking that I do. Walking's great for blood flow. It's also really good for maintaining a healthy weight. And if you're looking to lose some fat, walking is great for that. Maybe that's a topic for a whole nother episode, but trying to get as much movement as we can during the day is going to help with blood flow, and it's going to help us feel better. All right, Gooey, my turtle, is running out of patience, so we're going to wrap this up here. But I did want to give you a few out of the operatory tips too, because like I said, ergonomics is really important, obviously, but we need to make sure that our lifestyle is keyed in as well. How are you sleeping? Sleep Sleep is like the foundational thing that if we don't have it, everything gets worse. And if we have it, everything gets better. This is so important to prioritize. And I would say in my life, sleep is number one. Like, if anything is going to mess with my sleep, I'm not going to do it because I know how I feel and I know how I perform if I don't have enough sleep. So please prioritize your sleep. Some of those sleep trackers, like I used to wear a Whoop strap. I'm taking a break from it right now. I got a little obsessive with it, but those can really help tell you what is affecting your sleep. Like if you're eating late into the night, at least for me, that destroys my sleep. So I don't eat a good 3 hours before I go to sleep now. Alcohol and THC destroy your sleep. They might make you fall asleep faster, which kind of tricks you into thinking that they're helping. But as far as your REM sleep, which is what we really need for restorative, it destroys that. I have done a podcast episode on sleep, but there's so many resources out there too. Sleep is so important. So just make sure that you're prioritizing that. And what about diet? We talk all the time in dentistry as far as how bad inflammation is, right? These sugary, high processed, fast foods increase inflammation, which is going to increase our pain. It's always confused me why we have all of these candies and sweet treats and sugar and soda and frappuccinos in the back office in dentistry. One, they're terrible for our teeth. And also, they drive up inflammation. So it's like we're in the operatory in pain. We don't know what's wrong. And then we go back and have a donut or a sugar-filled coffee or whatever, which is just driving that inflammation up even more. So focusing on whole foods as close to their original form as possible, making sure that you're having enough protein during the day. That might also be another topic for another day. They recommend about 30 grams of high quality protein per meal. So what are you having for protein? Make sure that you're hitting that goal and then fill in the rest with like some healthy fats and some complex carbs. And then exercise. Exercise is so important. We already talked about walking, prioritizing strength training, making sure that we're at least maintaining our muscle mass, if not building more, because the older we get, we have this natural decline of muscle mass, but that translates to increased injury risk, increased pain, increased risk of things like osteoporosis if we don't have enough muscle. But we in dentistry, because of our muscle imbalances, we need to be careful as far as what exercises that we're doing. There's some that we shouldn't do and some that we should do. When I say muscle imbalances, we have some muscles that are completely overworked and tight, and then we have some that are very weak and almost atrophied. Okay, so there's an imbalance there. I have worked with a corrective exercise specialist, which I'll put her information down in the show notes as well. I have learned so much from her as far as exercising. I was doing so many things wrong before I started working with her. And after working with her, I'm stronger. My posture is better. I have less pain. And I feel like I'm actually working with my body instead of against it, if that makes sense. So we need to be intentional. These random workouts like random Orange Theory or HIIT workouts might not be the best for us. And if you love those, I'm sorry. I did Orange Theory it was like 7 or 8 years, and I loved it until it turned on me. And really, it just didn't feel good anymore. And I was starting to develop pain and stuff. And I was just like, I don't think this is right. And turns out it wasn't right. I should have been doing something else, which was working with a corrective exercise specialist. So highly recommend looking into her. She works just with dental clinicians and she trains virtually, which is nice. All right, that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but make sure you save this episode so you can refer back to it. If you're wanting to start off the new year right, maybe pick just 1 or 2 of these to focus on for a little bit, master it, and then move on to something else. Ergonomics and health and lifestyle, it is a lot to think about. And don't try to just do all of these things perfectly at once because, it's not going to happen and it's just going to overwhelm you. I'm always here. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me in the comments or by DM or email me. I don't care. I would love to see you in one of my courses or my membership where we can connect more. You can ask me direct questions. It's just a really fun place to be, and I'd love to have you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Straight Up with Steph and being interested in living better. What many listeners do is subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episodes of the show. Remember, you are the best person to take care of you, and by learning what we talk about on this show, you're taking one more step to being a healthier and happier you. I'll talk to you soon.